Here are 3 big ticket items to check on before you put your home on the market. I'm Chadbourne from Demetria's team, the Real Estate Group, and our team has the experience to help you navigate the home buying and selling process. When we put a house under contract and there are inspections, there's only a few things that if they go wrong really kill a deal. I mean, there are lots of them, right? If you have a leaking roof, if you have a major problem that's discovered. Well, here are 3 things that you can check in advance and make sure you're helping guard your deal against falling apart. Number 1, mold in the attic. This one often gets overlooked, particularly in houses where the access to the attic is just one of those square hatches, scuttle hole we call it, because most of the attic space is just insulation. For most people, when I go to their house and say, when's the last time you took a peek up there in the attic? They say, well, we've never looked up there, or maybe the inspector did on our house. The challenge you find is that those spaces that get very warm, if moisture gets in there, it's a great environment for mold or microbial growth to grow. Now, if there's no breathing and access to the house, it might not present a health threat, but it has the ability to spread. There are ways in which bathroom vents can be vented into an attic and they can let moisture in. There can be other areas that moisture is getting in there. So it's very important before you put your house on the market to take a peek up there. Take your flashlight and look at the sheathing on the backside, the inside of the roof, and say, is there any shadow or darkness or discoloration? If there is, it would be a good idea for us to get someone in there to give you a real evaluation. They can run mold tests, they can run other things. If you find it, it becomes a disclosure issue, and it's something that we disclose to any potential buyer. The reason that you check for it ahead of time is that if it comes up during an inspection, there are going to be people who are not willing to move forward, or they get nervous about it. I'd much rather have it dealt with before your home hits the market, disclose that we knew about it, it was taken care of, and it's been prevented from happening in the future, and that's going to give a buyer peace of mind. Number 2, heating system. Particularly if your heating system is older than 10 years, we want to make sure that we know that it is in good working order. Have you had it serviced annually? If it's been a year or 2 since your technician has been there, more likely than not, a buyer is going to want you to have the heating system serviced before the closing. Well, wouldn't it be a good idea for before any inspections and before any buyers come, for you to have your annual service scheduled? Now, obviously, if you have the type of heating system that doesn't require annual heating, like heat pump or some of the newer wall hanging units with natural gas, maybe you don't need them there, but I'll tell you, an inspector is going to ask, and on the disclosure we ask, when's the last time you had your heating system serviced? And when they're serviced, there's 2 things that happen. One, the technician will do a cleaning, so if you burn oil or if you have a filter, they'll go and replace filters and do the cleanings, and so that we know it's in good working order. But 2, they look for any other signs of problems, and quite often they'll fix them. It's much easier to fix it during a service call than to have to deal with it after a buyer has detected it and after it's been flagged by their home inspector. Now, of course, we don't necessarily have to, as a seller, address every item that comes up in a home inspection, but most buyers in Maine, a state that gets cold in the winter, where heating systems are such a fundamental part of how we keep our homes warm, a lot of buyers are going to want to get things fixed when they're discovered, and so why not get it in good shape beforehand? Third is your water system. Do you have a well, or do you have public water? If you have public water, there's not much that we need to talk about. But if you have a well, and if you've never had your water tested, maybe now's a good time for a water test. There are 2 types of water tests. One tests for dissolved things in the water. Usually that's called a potability test. And the other is radon water. Radon is a gas that comes from the earth. It's a heavy gas. We talk about it in terms of air tests and basements as well, but it can be dissolved in your water. And when that is, there's about a $5,000 to $7,000 price tag for this bubble up system that gets installed that bubbles the radon out of the water. Testing for radon, it costs a couple $100, is a good thing to figure out for a buyer or for a seller, because you're going to know whether or not this is something that needs to be addressed. On the potability side, there are some things like arsenic or uranium that can show up in your water that, again, are going to be an expensive fix for any buyer. If we know about that going in, we can either address it before we sell it, or you can disclose the issue to any buyer so that they know ahead of time. What we're trying to figure out is what can we detect prior to a buyer seeing it. And not only that, sometimes when we give these results, if they're positive, it helps a buyer be more comfortable waiving certain types of inspections and moving along a deal. Finally, big one to think about is, have there been any leaks or any water damage from the roof or in the basement? There are storms, there are times of the year in the spring where there's a lot of melting and runoff, or during storms when you see a lot in the roof. If these are things that you know about and that we know we're going to have to disclose, let's make sure we're fixing whatever the cause is so that we can tell people what the solution was, and we can repair any signs of damage so that they have certainty that the house is watertight and going to stand up well in the future. Those are a few big ticket items that you can look at before you put your house on the market that are likely to come up during an inspection and could make a difference to the deal staying together. If you have questions about how to take a look at these, or you'd like recommendations for vendors and contractors that can come out and help you test or look at and evaluate any of these items, please give us a call at Demetria's team, the real estate group. We would love to help you.